Hey guys, this is God of Politics. I'm going to go back to a brand new video, but before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But in today's video, I did want to talk about the election and specifically debunking the claims of voter fraud in this election and talking about why there was no substantial fraud, no fraud that would have changed any of the results in any of these states, and why Biden was, elected fair and square. Biden was legitimately elected to the office of the President of the United States. And so, I did want to talk about this because a couple of days ago, about a week ago now, I believe, I did do a debate with another YouTuber, Real American Politics. I will link the debate down in the description. It's a video on Red Eagle Politics' channel. So if you have not seen that yet, you can go check that out. I do believe I did well. I believe a lot of people thought I did well. Even people on the right who may have thought that there was fraud thought I did well in that debate. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about that in this video, kind of a more informal format, just reading off some of these notes that I have, talking about a lot of the different claims of voter fraud, talking about why there's a lot of misinformation being put out there, and kind of setting the record straight about what actually happened in this election and why this election was a pretty secure election and Biden was legitimately elected. So first of all, I am making this video right now. The Supreme Court just took up a case with Texas suing a couple of battleground states to try and invalidate their election results. But, the reason, first of all, why this is not significant, really, is that the Supreme Court doesn't really have the discretion to ignore this because this is a dispute between states, and that is only up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's the only court that has the power to solve disputes between states. That was one of the things, that's in the Constitution. That is precedent that has been set. And so they are taking up the Texas case. I can guarantee that they will rule against Trump. Biden's going to win this election. I can say that I can say that unequivocally. Biden is going to be the next president of the United States. But this lawsuit is going to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will rule against Trump, as all the other courts have ruled against Trump and Sidney Powell and all the other lawsuits that have been put out there so far. And so, don't be surprised, or you won't be surprised if when they don't rule in favor of Trump. But as you can see here on the screen, it does talk about Dominion, a New York Times article about Dominion, because Dominion's been one of the things that many people on the right have been pushing about, saying, Dominion voting systems are rigged, they're connected to the internet, so they're switching votes, all of this. I kind of wanted to set the record straight on that. So, Dominion is a company that was founded in Toronto, Canada. Their headquarters is now in Denver, Colorado. They have no relation to Smartmatic. They have no relation to Venezuela. They're not even, they're actually a competitor of Smartmatic, but some people have been saying that they have been associated with each other. So, a lot of of fraud claims have been associated with this. If you want to do some simple math, there's been claims that the turnout increases are irregular because of the turnout machines, but if you look at the 28 states that used Dominion, they had an average raw vote increase from 2016 to 2020 of 15.58%, whereas the 22 states that didn't use Dominion had an average turnout increase from 2016 to 2020 of 16.16%. So you actually had a greater turnout increase in states that didn't use Dominion. And in 10 battleground states specifically, I can link the article if anybody wants to have it. It's from a Washington Post article. From 10 battleground states, of those 731 counties in those states, 351 of those counties used Dominion. Trump won 283 of those counties that used Dominion, which is 81% of the counties. And of the counties that didn't use Dominion, Trump won 79% of them. So if they were committing fraud, you would think that Trump would win a lesser proportion of the counties that used Dominion rather than the ones that didn't. But he actually won more of the counties that used Dominion than the ones that didn't. Not much of a difference, but that just shows you that there's pretty much no discrepancy between these things. You can also look at the fact that if there was fraud in the system, why did urban areas trend red in this election in many cases? You had areas like Philadelphia trending red, areas like New York trending red, and sure, the suburbs of those areas trended blue, but the urban areas themselves, the areas controlled by Democrats, were areas that trended towards the Republican Party. And so, fraud in terms of internet, foreign, whatever, changing the votes, these kinds of ridiculous claims, that would be caught in a hand recount. And we've had hand recounts in multiple states. We've had them just off of the top of my head, in Georgia and Wisconsin specifically, they've done recounts in those states, which have been with paper ballot, and the Dominion machines have a paper ballot backup. And, I know this video is going to be a long video, but there are a lot of claims to get to. So, first of all, they have a paper ballot trail, a paper trail as a backup for the Dominion machines. If there were any vote switches with the Dominion machines, they would have been caught in that paper ballot recount of the machines, which was done in Georgia and Wisconsin. Then they found no change in the results. Sure, in Georgia, they found one county where there was a change in results, and sure, in Michigan, they found one county that was because of Dominion, but it had nothing to do with the software itself. It was all due to human error. So we look at this article here from the New York Times, and it talks about that. It says, it does say down here, the Dominion software was used in only 2 of the 5 counties that had problems in Michigan and Georgia, and in every instance there was a detailed explanation for what had happened. In all of the cases, software did not affect the vote counts. In the 2 Michigan counties that had mistakes, the inaccuracies were because of human errors, not software problems, according to the Michigan Department of State, county officials, and election security experts. 1 of the 2 Michigan counties used Dominion software. Issues in 3 Georgia counties had other explanations. In 1 county, an apparent problem with Dominion software delayed officials reporting of vote tallies, but did not affect the actual vote count. In 2 other counties, a separate company software slowed poll workers' ability to check in votes. So, immediately that talk of Dominion started when you had the Michigan lawsuit and, or not Michigan lawsuit, but the issue in Antrim County, and in Antrim County, that was all due to human error rather than an actual issue with the software. That's where all this talk about Dominion started with. And so there's a lot of things you can talk about with that, according to the nonpartisan OSCT Institute. They said, quote, many of the claims being asserted about Dominion are unquestionable voting technologies, misinformation at best, and in many cases, they're outright disinformation. So you have a lot of misinformation and disinformation in relation to Dominion, and I just did want to clear that up first. The next point is the topic of ballot dumps. Now, there's a lot of talk about, these 4 a.m. ballot dumps that came in 100% for Biden. There weren't any areas that came in 100% for Biden, but this has been one of the most widespread talking points from people on the right and people claiming that there was fraud. I had pointed out that there would be these ballot dumps in my video on election day. You can check that video out saying, when are we going to get results on election night? And I did say in that video, Biden is going to flip the state of Wisconsin when the Milwaukee ballots come in between 3 and 6 a.m. That is what county officials said, the governor said, the statewide officials, they all said that the Milwaukee ballots were going to come in between 3 and 6 a.m. When did they come in? They came around at 4:30, just in the middle of that time period. You had the same thing in 2018 where you had thousands of mail-in ballots that were not counted until a couple hours, a couple days even after the election in Wisconsin, and that made the difference in the governor election. And I said it would make the difference this time. It was no surprise that these ballot dumps happened, and really every county had ballot dumps. It was just much more pronounced in Milwaukee County than it was in all of these other counties that had reporting their mail-in ballots, because number one, these are heavily Republican counties that have less Democratic voters to vote by mail, so most people there were voting in person, and number two, they're smaller counties to begin with, whereas in Milwaukee you have a county that's already, plus 40 points Democrat, and then you add on top of the fact that mail-in ballots are predominantly Democrat, and you're going to get a situation where 90% of the ballots are in favor of Joe Biden. You see the same thing in Wayne County in Michigan. You see the same thing in Philadelphia and all of those suburban counties, Bucks County, Montgomery County, Delaware County. You're going to see the same thing in all of those cases, and so there's a lot of misinformation about those ballot dumps too, and there really just is nothing fishy about it at all. And this is one of the next points I want to make, which is about, the quote suitcases of illegal ballots in Georgia. And this has just been one of the most infuriating things to see because of how much misinformation of this there has been related to this, and there's been a lot of misinformation, but this is one of the most annoying things. And this is a video, I won't play the video, but I'm sure most of you have seen it, and if not, you can look it up very easily, but this is a video that they showed at the Georgia hearing to the Georgia state senators, showing a couple of poll workers pulling a suitcase of ballots from under a table after, most of the people had left the room. but they don't note, and it does say that in this article. I won't necessarily read quotes from this article, but I do have notes on it, and that is what it says in this article. If you want me to link it down below, I will link it to you. But it talks about how they weren't actually tabulating those ballots. They were actually counting those ballots. These were ballots that had been counted before, and they'd been tabulated before, but they were now being counted. This is a normal process that they do to make sure that the right amount of ballots have been counted. And there were poll watchers there. The Secretary of State's office did say that there were poll watchers there. And so, are you going to trust a blurry video, or are you going to trust the Secretary of State's office and what we do know about normal practices in the election? A couple other talking points I do want to talk about. Number one, or I guess this is number 3 or 4 at this point, but the down ballot races, there's been a lot of talk, why was there an undervote for the down ballot candidates? Why did Trump do so much worse than the down ballot candidates? Well, if you look at the last time an incumbent president lost, that was George H.W. Bush, his party gained 9 seats in the House that year, a party that also didn't have the House that year. They didn't get until 1994. And you could argue, the reason that they did worse is because Biden's campaign message was centered around the idea that Trump was the problem, not the Republican Party itself, which made many people vote Republican down ballot, even though they voted Biden at the top of the ticket. And Democrats have always, historically had problems down ballot at the state legislature level. For example, if you look at Michigan, it's a state that went red in 2016 for the first time in decades, but Democrats have actually not had the state senate in Michigan for over 30 years. They haven't had the Pennsylvania state senate since 1993, so they don't necessarily perform very well at all at this state legislature level, and it's not a surprise that they didn't in this election too. This was not a wave year by any means, and nobody with a realistic prediction expected it to be a wave year for either side. I did not expect it to be a wave year, and it wasn't a wave year. And if you have been watching my channel, that my prediction was one of the most accurate. I only got one state wrong, and that was the state of Georgia. I said it would be narrowly for Trump. It was narrowly for Biden. The next point is on the rejection rates. Now, a lot of people have been saying, why were the rejection rates so low in this election? They should have been higher. That would lead to more mail-in ballots being tossed, and that would lead to Trump flipping states like Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin, which would give him 269 electoral votes and eventually win in the House, so on and so forth. But the reason that we had lower rejection rates this election is for a number of reasons. Now, if we do look at this New York Times article, again, I will not read it word for word, but this is where I do get a lot of my information, and I do have a lot of notes based on it. But we did have a very low rejection rate in this election, but there are many reasons for that. And for example, it talks about this in the article where you do say, if I can find it down over here, it does talk about how they've removed a lot of the requirements for these mail-in ballots. For example, Minnesota no longer requires that absentee ballots be witnessed, according to acceding to a court ruling that the mandate was not justified during a pandemic. In Kentucky, technological advancements that have made it possible to track mail-in ballots enable state officials to relax long-standing provisions, such as the requirement for multiple signatures that were a major cause of past rejections. You also had the extension of a lot of these deadlines for the ballots in states like Pennsylvania, which was very infamous. But one of the things that I do think is most interesting about this point is there has been so much praise for Florida's voting and election system, but they also had a rejection rate on par with that of other swing states. So, people overall, and people on the right especially, have been praising Florida's election system, saying they did it so smoothly, they reported the ballots so fast. They had a rejection rate on par with Pennsylvania and Georgia. But why is it only fraudulent in Georgia and Pennsylvania? Oh, that's the states that Trump narrowly lost, because you do have a lot of cases in Florida where, the rejection rate was higher before and it is lower now. But you created a process to cure those ballots. That's another one of the things I want to talk about. If your ballot was rejected, there was a much smoother and much more seamless process for curing your ballot so it could be accepted, whereas it wasn't accepted before. That is a process that is pretty new this election, especially with the influx of mail-in ballots, and the demographics that is doing the mail-in ballots and sending in the mail-in ballots this election is different from what it was in years past. In years past, you had a situation where you had a lot of older people voting. They may not necessarily have everything right, and that caused a lot of issues. And sure, in the primary you had high rejection rates. That's because, again, there was not much of an effort in voter outreach to teach people how to actually fill out these ballots correctly. Now, after the rejection rates, the next points that I have been hurting a lot are the affidavits. I mean, these affidavits are alleging a number of crazy things, ridiculous things. So, some of these affidavits aren't even alleging fraud. They're alleging silly things like the poll watchers were being, taunted, were taunting other people, and they were sent a little bit further away from the actual ballot counting during a time where there's a global pandemic. But these affidavits don't really mean much because, you see a lot of situations where these people go into court, where they can't lie in court, obviously, and they retract a lot of their statements. For example, in Chatham County, Georgia, where someone claimed that there was 53 ballots that arrived after the election day, and they went into court and they basically said, look, I don't know when these ballots came in. And so you do not usually have people that are actually prosecuted because of a false affidavit, especially because these aren't really done in court. But when you do go into court, you're not allowed to lie. Otherwise, you will, if you're a lawyer, be disbarred, or if you're a civilian, be tried for perjury. That doesn't usually happen with affidavits, and so there's a lot less incentive for people to tell the truth on these. And so the Trump administration has been taunting them a lot, but not taunting them, but flouting them a lot, saying, oh, look at these affidavits, it's evidence of millions of votes being fraudulent. But that's just completely ridiculous. And the next topic I want to talk about is Arizona. A lot of people a couple of days ago when they were talking about the Arizona ballots or the Arizona results being certified, saying, oh, this is fraudulent. But if you do want to look at Arizona, it really has everything that the Republican Party has asked for. They have IDs, signature checks, poll watchers, no ballot harvesting, no ballots after Election Day. They have a Republican state legislature, a Republican governor. Biden narrowly won the state, and people still complain that their system is somehow fraudulent after all of these checks to make sure, some of these aren't even necessary checks, but they've made those checks in place to somehow, to stop the fraud or whatever fraud does occur, which is very little to begin with. But Trump is still complaining about fraud in Arizona, which obviously just does not exist. And, there was an audit that said, 3% of ballots were tainted, but that was out of 100 ballot sample that was done by the Trump campaign itself. And, I do want to get back to Georgia for a second, because in Georgia you had a situation where, they were saying that I think it was Georgia. People were saying that they got hold of a Dominion voting system. The Trump campaign got hold of a Dominion voting system, when, first of all, that was just not true. And they said that they flipped ballots from Biden to Trump. But this was just the results of a hand recount, not anything to do with the software switching the machines. And again, these things are due to human error, which it happens, of course, and it showed up in the hand recount, not thousands of ballots being changed. You can look at the paper ballots as well. A lot of people on the right have been calling for a paper ballot trail, but the fact is that we already have paper ballots in most states, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. All but 13 states have a statutory requirement for voting machines to have either paper ballots be used, or for there to be paper trail on the ballots. And 9 out of those last 13 states use paper ballots without a statutory requirement. And of those last 4 states, 3 of them have some jurisdictions where they have paper ballots and others don't, all of which are Republican states: Texas, Kentucky, and Tennessee. The only state where nowhere has paper ballots and a paper trail is Louisiana, which is also a Republican state. And if there was issues with the software in these voting machines, again, it would show up in a hand recount, which has been done in states like Wisconsin and Georgia, and still nothing was changed. Now, another point is on the state legislatures, saying, the state legislatures can just give the electors to Trump. First of all, they can't really do that. The states do have laws on the books saying that they can't just send the electors to whoever they want. They have laws on the books saying, pretty much every state, I believe every state, has laws saying that they give the electors to the person that has won the popular vote in their state. And if they decide they don't want to send electors, if they could somehow, probably break the law and not send electors, it doesn't actually do anything, because currently there are 538 electors. If Pennsylvania, with its 20 electoral votes, did not send electors, it is not out of 538 ballots, and it is instead out of 518 electoral votes. And at that point, Biden doesn't need to get as many electoral votes to win. So it's not like he's knocked below 269 and it suddenly goes to the House and Trump wins, because you'll need a majority of the electors that are present, which is in the 12th Amendment. So that is not a path to victory for Trump. And, even in these state legislatures itself, for example, in Pennsylvania, only 26 Republicans in the Pennsylvania State House even supported just decertifying the results. A resolution that failed in the session of the Pennsylvania House, a resolution that failed as a session of the Pennsylvania House ended on Monday. They needed 102 to overturn the results of the election, if they could even legally do that, which I could doubt that they actually would. And as for the court cases as well, the Supreme Court is taking up that Texas case, but it is going to rule against it, as all of the other courts have done so far. And some of these swings, people have been saying, oh, these swings are kind of weird. Actually, they're not. There's one key factor, I would say, that's driving a lot of these swings, and that is education demographics. Sure, race, minority groups did trend towards the Republican Party. Pretty much all minority groups, if not all minority groups, trended towards the Republican Party, and that is the reason why some of these urban areas actually trended towards the Republican Party. But the reason that the suburbs trended so heavily blue, on par, if not a little bit more or a little bit less than what it was in 2016, is because of education. White voters with a college degree are the demographic, and is the demographic that Donald Trump lost the ground with in this election. You talk about Kenosha, for example. People were saying, well, why did Kenosha swing rightward, but areas like Waukesha County in Wisconsin swung leftward? Well, if you do look at Kenosha, 25.7% of the population has a college degree, and it swung 2.8% rightward. However, if you look at Waukesha County, which swung 5.9% leftward, 43.8% of people have a college education. In another Milwaukee suburb of Ozaukee, which swung 6.9% leftward, 48.4% of people are college educated. And so you can see that there's a reason behind every single county shift. I can't go into every single county shift, but there are legitimate reasons why we had those county shifts. The next one is Pennsylvania. In terms of the party registration, the requested ballots versus turned-in ballots. So this talking point that there's like 1.6 million ballots sent out and 2.4 million returned, that just was not true at all. There was 2.6 million returned ballots out of 3,087,000 returned ballots. That's an 85.2% return rate, and that is completely normal, and it is completely to be expected. And so, another point, which is actually pretty basic, it's if there was so much rampant voter fraud, why did Democrats lose winnable Senate seats, lose seats in the House, lose 100 seats overall in state legislatures? That just seems like a ridiculous strategy if you wanted to commit this mass voter fraud and have this network of Democrats and Republicans alike at the highest levels of government, all the way down to the lowest levels of government, all committing felonies just to get Joe Biden into the White House with a Republican Senate and a greatly diminished House majority that actually can't really do much. So it just seems completely ridiculous here. I do have a couple more points to make. A couple points about Project Veritas, for example. This was saying, oh, there's fraud in Minnesota because of Project Veritas. But the subject of the Project Veritas voter fraud story says that he was offered a bribe to do the story. So it's more misinformation about that. And, a couple other points I do want to make. North Carolina, for example, if you guys want to do all these audits into some of these states like Georgia and Arizona, why not do an audit into a state like North Carolina? I've been talking for a while, so I'm a little difficult to talk right now. But in North Carolina, why not do an audit there if you're going to do an audit into all these other states? Oh wait, because Trump obviously won the state of North Carolina, and you have all these lawsuits by Sidney Powell, which have all gotten struck down as well in Georgia and Arizona and Michigan, so on and so forth. And the final point I do want to make is on a letter that Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, and I believe Mark Buchan, the congressman from Milwaukee, did write about Dominion. That is a talking point that has been going around. Sure, they said Dominion had some problems, but they also said pretty much all the softwares in the country had some problems, and they were more complaining about the fact that they were controlled by private enterprise, not really the fact that there were necessarily problems with the systems itself. And so that has been another talking point that has been perpetuated by the right, and I did want to put that to rest as well. So I hope that I did get to enough of the points here. That is a lot of the points that I did get to during the debate, and I did want to reiterate them on my channel. If you want to check out the debate that I did with Real American, you can also watch that debate. But I did hope that I did get to enough of those points. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, be sure to say them down in the comments. I will respond to the comments as long as it's civil, as long as it's actually making a sound point, and I will get back to you on what I believe the actual result is. But what I do believe is that this was a clean election, this was a free and fair election, and Joe Biden was elected, and that is what we will see. The safe harbor deadline is today. The Electoral College votes in 8 days. The Congress, the official date for Joe Biden to be elected is January 6th, and he would be inaugurated on January 20th. That is the timeline for what is going to happen, and Joe Biden will become a president. So thank you all for watching this video. I know it's been a long video, but I hope you did watch the full thing, because I do believe that it was a pretty insightful video. I do believe I've gone through a lot of different facts, but like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But again, thank you guys all for watching, and I will see you guys later.